So the Michigan primary has come and gone, and Al Sayed has been able to eke out a victory, overcoming Haley Stevens and the Democratic establishment of the state and Chuck Schumer, and a lot of outside money that came in against him. And it sets a very interesting stage for the coming weeks. It sets up a lot of interesting narratives for the media to run with as upcoming progressive challengers and primaries happen. Most notably, next week, Hong is running for governor. Francesca Hong, I believe her first name is running for governor um, in Wisconsin. And it'll be very interesting to see how she does, even though she seems very likely to win her primary as well. But going back to Michigan, setting up the stage for how the party will come together will be very interesting. They're supposed to be meeting a bunch this week, and I think they will come together, even though the campaign got very nasty. I mean, a lot of that nastiness was from outside spending, like AIPAC, so Haley Stevens and her faction can sort of throw their hands in the air and be like, we can't officially, legally coordinate with the super PACs, wink on wink. So we're not responsible for that wave of Islamophobia that came against you from the AIPAC ads specifically. And I think maybe that'll help bring the two parties together a little faster. And looking at Mike Rogers, the Republican opponent for El Sayed in the upcoming general election, um, a lot of talk is being made about how tight the race was in the primary and that he only won by a single point, when a lot of his internal polling and polling that he released to the press showed him up at least 10 points. But a win is a win. And Mike Rogers, if we're talking about underperforming, has also historically underperformed in his elections. He lost his last Senate race when Trump won the state and underperformed Trump in a presidential election year. So when Trump isn't on the ballot and Trump is unpopular in his state at this point, he has some real headwinds to run on, to run against, run into. Don't want to mix my metaphors here. But he doesn't have much to run on. I mean, they've already set the initial stages of what the two campaigns will talk about. El Sayed is going to continue his message of getting money out of politics, putting money in your pocket, and getting Medicare for all. Simple hammering of points. I think he has learned the Mondani lessons of communications, of running a progressive campaign, probably better than any other candidate who's recently run on the federal level. And that message, will be continued to hammer against work well, I think, against when it's hammered against Mike Rogers. And Mike Rogers, it seems, only has a lot of Islamophobia against Abdul, and that he is a progressive Muslim man. And I just don't know. It'll be very interesting to see how much gas is left in that tank and how effective that attack continues to be. As a native New Yorker, I lived through a period where it was extremely effective in New York City, and I saw many people get animated from a very primal and emotional place for that argument before, it just no longer had the same power it did immediately after 9/11. And now an entire generation has grown up with a president named Barack Hussein Obama. So I don't think the name itself is even as scary as it used to be. And it's, not like he's a extremely orthodox or, he doesn't have positions. Doesn't support Sharia law. There's nothing there that's super scary in his positions. And, they've already turned the dial up to 11, calling him a communist, calling him, a terrorist, all sorts of things. So I just don't think, I think they've already played that card, and they don't have real substance besides that to run on. But, it is been an effective card. It wouldn't continue to still be played if it didn't work. And, we will see how effective it is going to be. I think it would be most effective if it really was just a straight up uh, battle of Islamophobia versus, uh, you know, progressive ideas of fighting big money. But Trump is obviously going to inject himself into this race at some point, most likely because Abdul is a charismatic Democrat. He's photogenic. He looks good on TV. And those are the types of people that Trump wants to be on TV with, appearing, besides them if he can, when he was able to summon Mondami to the White House, or, against them and in contrast, just to, I guess, be in the arena and keep himself consistently relevant. Um, and so I'm sure he's going to inject himself into the race at some point, and I don't think that's going to be very helpful for Mike Rogers. I don't think Trump has the same sway that he once had amongst the working people of Michigan. I remember that, when he toured the factories in Dearborn, I think at the beginning of last year, or a year ago, around a year ago, I think it was, maybe 6 months ago. But he got heckled by the factory floor workers who, for protecting Jeffrey Epstein. So his working class appeal, I think, has dramatically declined as the price of gas has gone up. So it remains an open question if Trump will be able to have the discipline to stay out of the race and stop injecting himself into the headlines and, visit Michigan himself too often, because I don't think that would be positive. But to go back to some of the strengths of Abdul al-Sayed, I do think, there's been a trend that people have been talking about that, it's finally time for younger members of the Democratic Party to stand up and take more power, to be more active in voicing policies, and generally to dismantle the sort of deference to seniority that existed within the Democratic Party, where people were just sort of hanging around waiting for positions to open up so they could move up and never challenging incumbents or anything like that. And it basically made for a system that was far too comfortable and a Democratic Party that was inept in countering and meeting the moment and improving the conditions of people's lives. So I think that, obviously there's been a lot of candidates who have been primaried successfully and have lost their primaries and have been replaced. Incumbents, have to be pretty good and on top of the issues to stick around these days, and I think that's how it should be. People shouldn't feel safe, or they shouldn't feel that they have a right to any sort of federal or government job that you have to be elected for, because you need to be constantly delivering for the people in those positions. And I think Abdul understands that, and he represents, I think, some of the most talented crop of the younger politicians who are going to be elected, hopefully, this cycle. He's a very good speaker, and specifically, he's found a way to talk about progressive issues and economic issues in a way that does not get bogged down in any sort of Trump one woke speak, where he's very clear about what his principles are. He's very comfortable about talking about his principles. It is hard to trip him up when they try to throw him gotcha questions, which he will obviously continue to get around Israel and them trying to find the worst way to color his opinion on Israel or to make him seem more extreme than he is, because I think the idea of conditioning weapon sales to Israel or any nation to make sure that they are not committing genocide or trashing human rights is a pretty good idea. And I think, generally applied, which is how he talks about it, it's pretty basic understanding of, at least how I would want my tax dollars spent, because I'm not naive enough to think that there's a way in which my tax dollars are not going to be spent on some military and, weapons applications. And I would not want them, if it has to be done, I want it to be done for the U.S. military, first and foremost, and not foreign militaries. And if it is going to foreign militaries and allies, I want them to be defending themselves and upholding shared interest. And the murder of children does not constitute a shared interest, in my opinion. And I think that that is not an extreme position, but it will be very interesting to see how that gets hammered out in an election, because I believe AIPAC spent officially around $30 million in the primary against him. I bet that's going to go up significantly in the general. So we'll see which version of this messaging against him they find is most effective and gets hammered out the most. But he is a very good speaker. He's very comfortable in the moment. He doesn't get tripped up. He doesn't feel like he's tied to talking points that he's going to hit in sort of a robotic way that breaks from the moment or what people are trying to talk to him about in interviews. And there's a great benefit for that. I think that, he's not a democratic socialist, even though people are going to try to call him a socialist and a communist. And I think that, his comfort in speaking about his capitalist values, and his support for big car companies and things like that in Michigan are going to cut through a lot of that noise. And I think that is really one of his strengths that make him sort of a tier one candidate. Looking forward to next week, there's going to be the Wisconsin governor's primary, where Francesca Hong, who is a Democratic Socialist, could become the first Democratic Socialist to run for governor, I believe. And I think she has very good policies. She seems like a reasonably strong candidate. But some of the interviews I have seen of her, she does get a little bit of tongue-tied when, they ask her about old tweets or things like that. And I think we're already in the age where politicians need to be able to look at the camera and go, yeah, I disavowed that old tweet. I was super woke. It was COVID and I hadn't left my house for 3 weeks. Or, I was 13 or 14 when I tweeted that. Because we're going to quickly approach where politicians have, unending digital records for their whole lives and their preteens and their early teens and their college years. And we'll see where society decides on how much baggage your early digital footprint will have. But I think the more comfortable you are saying, yeah, I tweeted that, I commented that, I don't believe that anymore. And if you really don't believe that anymore, you should be able to eloquently explain what caused your change in beliefs and how that thinking changed over time. And, being genuine, I think, is the most sought after trait in a politician right now these days. And, being able to talk about how your opinions have changed over time, genuinely, I think, is a huge strength to the politicians who can do it. And I think that, when Abdul has been approached about some of his past tweets and things like that, he's felt very comfortable talking about it and how his positions have changed in a way where, like, Francesca Hong, she just needs to say Thanksgiving's nice, I don't want to cancel Thanksgiving. Just say it. It's fine. It won't hurt anybody. It'll help your chances. Thanksgiving's great. It helps the economy. Don't look up the history about it. Rather, just speak positively about the holiday and the positive associations people have with it. And then if you really must come back to it at a later point, talk about how you feel we need to do more for Native American people. But if you can't cleanly say, yes, the tradition of Thanksgiving is fine and I don't want to get rid of it anymore, you're just giving people a dumb attack line. And I would like Francesca Hong to win and more Democratic candidates to speak like they haven't consulted consultants before they talk all the time. Or, not consultants, but the Twitter hive mind of the most annoying language possible. And I say that as a very progressive person.